Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion Ascendant. His forearms were crossed behind his back as he watched the planet below through the massive viewing window. The world was small and brown, covered in mining equipment and human settlements. It was just another target in the Galactic Confederacy's expansion plan. The Admiral's blue skin showed the scars of many battles. His red eyes glowed with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. Behind him, 200 Confederate ships waited in perfect formation. Each ship was a weapon of incredible power. The smallest could destroy a city. The largest could crack a moon in half. "Admiral," said Captain Vexthari from her position at the tactical station, "all ships report ready for orbital bombardment. The human colony has approximately 50,000 inhabitants. Estimated completion time is 6 hours. Zethkar nodded slowly. This was routine work. Humans were weak creatures who had somehow spread across several star systems, but they posed no real threat to the Confederacy. Their technology was primitive. Their ships were slow and clumsy. Their weapons could barely scratch Confederate armor. "Begin the operation," Zethkar commanded. "Standard bombardment pattern. Make it quick and clean." The first wave of plasma cannons fired from the fleet. Bright green beams of energy streaked down toward the planet's surface. The beams would hit the major population centers first, then move to the mining facilities. It was a method the Confederacy had used on dozens of worlds. Simple, effective, and final. Zethkar watched the energy beams race toward the planet when his sensor officer suddenly spoke up. "Admiral, I'm detecting an unusual energy signature emerging from the nebula." Zethkar turned to look at the officer, a young Kithrin named Jexpol. "What kind of signature?" "Unknown, sir. It's unlike anything in our databases. The readings are ... strange." On the main screen, the swirling purple and blue gases of the Veil Nebula began to shift. Something was moving through the dense clouds. Something large. The nebula's gases parted like water around an invisible object. "Put it on screen," Zethkar ordered. What emerged from the nebula made every officer on the bridge stop and stare. It was a ship, but unlike any ship they had ever seen. The vessel was massive, easily 3 times larger than the Dominion Ascendant. Its hull seemed to absorb light, making it difficult to look at directly. A surface appeared to bend and twist, as if the metal itself was alive. "Sir," Jexpol said, his voice shaking slightly, "the ship's construction material is unknown. Our sensors can't penetrate it. It's like the hull is eating our scan beams." Zethkar studied the strange vessel. Despite its enormous size, it moved with grace that seemed impossible. No ship that large should be able to maneuver like a fighter craft. Yet this one glided through space as if it weighed nothing at all. "Communication from the unknown vessel, Admiral," reported the communications officer. "Put it through." A voice came over the speakers. It was calm and human, speaking in perfect Confederate standard language. "Confederate fleet, you have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system." The bridge fell silent. Several officers looked at each other in disbelief. Zithkar felt his pride flare up like a fire in his chest. How dare these primitive humans give orders to the mighty Confederate fleet? "Unknown vessel," Zethkar replied. "You are interfering with an official Confederate operation. Identify yourself immediately and prepare to be boarded." 20 seconds, the human voice responded. Zethkar's red eyes blazed with anger. "Captain Vexthari, target that ship with forward plasma cannons. Fire a warning shot across their bow." "Yes, Admiral." The Dominion Ascendant's main plasma cannon swiveled toward the mysterious human ship. The weapon charged with a high-pitched whine that filled the bridge. This cannon could destroy a small moon. It had never failed to make enemy ships surrender. After a single demonstration shot, the bright green beam fired across space toward the human vessel. Zethkar expected to see the shot pass in front of the ship's nose, close enough to show the humans what kind of power they were facing. Instead, something impossible happened. The plasma beam hit the human ship's hull and simply vanished. There was no explosion, no damage, no energy discharge. The beam disappeared as if it had never existed. The ship's strange dark surface showed no sign that it had been hit by one of the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. What just happened? Zethkar demanded. Sir, our plasma beam made contact with their hull, but there's no damage reading. It's like the energy was absorbed completely, Jexpol reported, his voice filled with confusion. 10 seconds, the human voice said. Zethkar looked around his bridge. His officers stared at their instruments in disbelief. The sensor readings made no sense. Their most powerful weapon had done nothing to the human ship. Nothing at all. Sir, what are your orders? Captain Vexthari asked. Zethkar had conquered 40 star systems. He had destroyed rebel fleets 10 times the size of this single human ship. He had brought entire civilizations to their knees. He would not be intimidated by one vessel, no matter how strange it appeared. All ships target the human vessel. Full bombardment. Destroy it. Admiral, are you sure? Vexthari asked. We don't understand their technology. Maybe we should fire, Zethkar commanded. Time's up, said the human voice. 200 Confederate ships opened fire at once. The space between the fleet and the human vessel filled with energy beams, plasma bolts, and missile trails. It was enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. The attack lit up the darkness of space like a deadly fireworks display. Every single shot hit the human ship. The vessel was so large that missing would have been impossible. For a moment, the ship's hull glowed with the absorbed energy of the massive attack. Then the glow faded, and the ship remained completely undamaged. Zethkar felt something cold settle in his stomach. This was impossible. No ship could survive that kind of bombardment. No technology existed that could absorb that much energy without any damage at all. Sir, Jexpol called out, his voice now filled with fear. I'm reading massive energy buildup from the human vessel. Evasive maneuvers, all ships. Zethkar ordered, but the human ship didn't fire any weapons. Instead, something far more terrifying began to happen. Across the Confederate fleet, ships began to malfunction. The first sign was small things. Navigation systems giving wrong readings. Communication channels switching frequencies on their own. Weapon targeting systems losing lock. Then the problems got worse. On the bridge of the Stellan Light, Captain Vexthari watched in horror as her tactical display showed her own missile batteries turning toward the Dominion Ascendant. What's happening? She shouted to her crew. Ma'am, the weapons are firing on their own. I'm not giving any commands. Her weapons officer replied. Across the fleet, the same thing was happening. Ships were turning their weapons on each other. Navigation systems were plotting collision courses. Life support systems were threatening to shut down. The most advanced military technology in the galaxy was acting like it had developed a mind of its own. And through it all, the mysterious human ship sat perfectly still, as if it were conducting an orchestra of chaos. Admiral, Zethkar gripped the railing of his command platform as his own ship's systems began to rebel against him. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. The human voice came over the communication system again, still calm and patient. Admiral, I suggest you listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Your fleet is no longer under your control. It's under mine. Zethkar stared at the human ship on his screen, his mind struggling to accept what was happening. Somehow, these humans had taken control of his entire fleet without firing a single shot. They had turned the Confederacy's own weapons against them. What do you want? Zethkar asked, his voice barely a whisper. "To talk," the human replied. "But first, you need to understand something important. Everything you think you know about humans is wrong. And everything you think you know about your own technology is about to change." Captain Vexthari watched her control panel with growing terror. The missile batteries on her ship, the Stellar Might, were moving on their own. She had given no orders to fire, yet the targeting system was locked onto Admiral Zethkar's flagship. "Override the weapons system," she shouted to her crew. "I'm trying, Captain," her weapons officer replied, his 6 fingers flying over the controls. "The system won't respond. It's like something else is controlling it." On the main screen, Vexthari could see other Confederate ships in the same situation. The heavy cruiser Iron Fist was pointing its main guns at the destroyer Swift Strike. The battleship Mountain Breaker was charging its plasma cannons while aimed directly at a group of smaller vessels. "Warning, missile launch in 10 seconds, announced the ship's computer in its usual calm voice. "Computer, cancel missile launch," Vexthari commanded. "Command not recognized," the computer replied. Vexthari felt her hearts racing. She had been in space combat for over 100 years, but nothing had prepared her for this. Her own ship was about to attack her allies, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. 5 seconds to missile launch. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "I'm receiving coordinates from the human vessel." "What coordinates?" "Movement. Instructions. They're telling us to move to position 77 Alpha." Vexthari looked at the coordinates on her screen. The position was 3 kilometers to starboard, away from the main fleet formation. "Those coordinates will take us out of firing range of the Admiral's ship. 2 seconds to missile launch." Vexthari made a quick decision. "Helm, emergency maneuver to coordinates 77 Alpha. Maximum thrust." The Stellar Might's engines roared to life, pushing the ship away from its previous position. As soon as the ship reached the new coordinates, something amazing happened. The weapon system stopped its countdown. The missile batteries returned to their normal position. All systems returned to normal operation. "Captain," her weapons officer said with relief, "we have control again." Across the Confederate fleet, the same scene was playing out on dozens of ships. Vessels that followed the coordinates sent by the human ship regained control of their systems. Ships that refused to move continued to experience malfunctions. Admiral Zethkar watched from his bridge as his carefully organized fleet scattered across space. Some ships moved to the positions indicated by the humans. Others tried to maintain their original formation and continued to suffer system failures. "Sir," reported Jex Pol, 17 ships have moved to the coordinates provided by the human vessel. All 17 report normal system operation. The remaining ships are still experiencing malfunctions." Zethkar's mind raced. The humans weren't just jamming their systems. They were controlling them with perfect precision. Every piece of technology on every ship was somehow under human command. "How is this possible?" he asked aloud. "Admiral," his science officer spoke up, "I've been analyzing the patterns of system failures. It's not random. The humans are controlling our technology at the most basic level. They're not hacking our computers. They're commanding our computers." "That's impossible," Zethkar said. "Our systems are protected by quantum encryption. No outside force can access them. Sir, with respect, something is accessing them. And doing it better than we can." On the main screen, the mysterious human ship remained perfectly still. It hadn't fired a single weapon, yet it had complete control over the most powerful military fleet in Confederate space. The communication channel opened again, and the calm human voice filled the bridge. "Admiral Zethkar, my name's Captain Chun. I think it's time we had a proper conversation." "What do you want?" Zethkar demanded. I want you to understand what's really happening here, Captain Shun replied. Your ships are not malfunctioning. They're working exactly as designed. The problem is that you never understood who designed them. Zethkar felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? I mean that every piece of technology your Confederacy uses was originally developed by humans. Your quantum computers, your plasma weapons, your faster-than-light drives. All of it came from human research that we allowed you to discover. That's impossible, Zethkar said. The Confederacy has been advancing for centuries. We developed our technology through our own research. Did you? Captain Shun asked. Tell me, Admiral, where did your people first discover quantum computing principles? Zethkar paused. Every Confederate citizen learned this in school. The ruins on Zarian Prime, ancient technology left by a previous civilization. Those weren't ruins, Admiral. Those were research stations that we abandoned after you found them. We wanted you to find them. The bridge fell silent. Jexpol looked up from his sensor station with wide eyes. Sir, I'm detecting massive data. Transfers from the human ship. They're sending information directly to our computers. Block the transfers, Zethkar ordered. I can't, sir. Our firewalls aren't even slowing them down. It's like they have the master keys to everything. On every screen throughout the Confederate fleet, information began to appear. Technical diagrams, research notes, development timelines. All of it showed the same thing. Human scientists developing the technologies that the Confederacy believed. They had discovered or invented themselves. Captain Vexthare stared at her screen in disbelief. The data showed human researchers creating the plasma cannon design that armed her ship. The same design the Confederacy had developed 50 years ago after finding incomplete blueprints on a dead world. This can't be real, she whispered. But the evidence was overwhelming. Every major Confederate technological breakthrough was traced back to human research. The Confederacy hadn't been advancing through their own genius. They had been following a path carefully laid out by humanity. Why? Admiral Zethkar asked, his voice heavy with the weight of understanding. Why would you do this? Because we needed you to be strong, Captain Shun replied. We needed you to develop your military capabilities. We needed you to become a spacefaring civilization capable of defending yourselves. Defending ourselves from what? From what's coming from the galactic core. But that's a conversation for later. Right now, I want to show you what happens when we stop being gentle with your technology. Captain Shun's ship, the Probability Storm, began to emit a different kind of energy. This time, instead of causing malfunctions, it began improving the Confederate systems. On the Stellar Might, Captain Vexthare watched in amazement as her weapon systems upgraded themselves. Targeting accuracy improved by 300%. Power efficiency doubled. New weapon options appeared on her control panel that she had never seen before. Captain, her engineer reported, our engines are running at 150% efficiency. That should be impossible, but all systems are stable. Across the fleet, the same improvements were happening. Ships that had been the pride of Confederate engineering were being enhanced beyond their original specifications. Weapons became more accurate, shields became stronger, engines became more powerful. Admiral Zethkar watched his tactical display as his fleet's combat effectiveness tripled in real time. You're improving our ships. I'm showing you what your ships were always capable of, Captain Shun corrected. We built limitations into the technology we gave you. Safety features to prevent you from accidentally destroying yourselves. But now you can see what happens when those limitations are removed. You've been controlling us for decades, Zethkar said, the full scope of the situation finally becoming clear. We've been guiding you, Captain Shun said. There's a difference. You still made your own choices. You still fought your own battles. We just made sure you had the tools you needed to survive what's coming. Jexpol looked up from his station with fear in his eyes. Admiral, if they've been controlling our technology all this time, what else can they do? As if in answer to his question, something new appeared on the main screen. Text began scrolling across every display in the Confederate fleet. Personal files, classified military documents, private communications. Everything the Confederacy thought was secret was laid bare. "We know everything about your civilization," Captain Chun said softly. "Every plan, every secret, every fear. We've been watching and listening for longer than your current government has existed. Then why reveal yourselves now?" Zethkar asked. "Because it's time for the Confederacy to understand the truth about humanity's place in the galaxy. And it's time for you to decide whether you want to continue being pawns in someone else's game, or whether you want to become partners in something much larger." The Admiral looked around his bridge at his officers. They all stared back at him with the same expression of shock and uncertainty. Everything they thought they knew about their place in the galaxy had been turned upside down in a matter of minutes. "What kind of partnership?" Zethkar asked. "The kind where you learn what humans are really capable of," Captain Chun replied. "But first, you need to make a choice. You can try to continue your mission against the human colonies, knowing that every shot you fire will be redirected wherever we choose. You can withdraw and report back to your government that humans are not to be underestimated. Or you can ask for a full demonstration of what humanity can really do." Captain Chun's voice filled the bridge of the Dominion Ascendant with an almost casual tone. "Admiral, what I'm about to show you will change how your people see the universe. Are you certain you want to continue?" Admiral Zethkar looked around his bridge. His officers waited for his decision, their faces showing mixtures of fear and curiosity. He had spent his entire life believing that the Confederacy was the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. Now he was beginning to understand that they might be nothing more than children playing with toys. "Show me," he said firmly. "Very well. First, let me introduce you to some friends." The space around the probability storm began to shimmer. More ships appeared, materializing out of what seemed like empty space. Not just one or two ships, but dozens of them. Each vessel was as large and mysterious as Captain Chun's ship, their dark hulls bending light in impossible ways. "How many ships do you have?" Zethkar asked, his voice barely a whisper. "In this system? 47, Captain Chun replied. "In your local sector? About 3,000. In human space overall? That's a number you don't have words for in your language." Jexpol looked up from his sensors, his face pale. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy readings from all directions. There are human ships everywhere. They've been here the entire time, invisible to our sensors." "Not invisible," Captain Chun corrected. "Hidden. We've been watching your fleet since you entered Confederate space 6 months ago. We've been tracking every move, listening to every communication, analyzing every tactical decision." Admiral Zethkar felt the weight of realization settling on his shoulders. "You knew we were coming to attack the human colonies." "Of course we knew. We wrote the orders you received from Confederate High Command." The bridge fell completely silent. Captain Vexthare's voice came over the communication channel from her ship, the Stellar Might. "Admiral, did she just say they wrote our orders?" "Admiral Zethkar," Captain Chun continued, "would you like to see the real communication that your government sent you?" On the main screen, text appeared. It was a message from Confederate High Command, but it was completely different from the orders Zethkar remembered receiving. Instead of ordering an attack on human colonies, the original message instructed the fleet to conduct peaceful first contact protocols with any human vessels they encountered. "This is impossible," Zethkar said. "I remember the orders clearly. We were told to eliminate human resistance in this sector." "You remember what we wanted you to remember," Captain Chun explained. We changed your orders during transmission. We changed the reports you sent back to High Command. We've been controlling both sides of your communications for months. Jexpol's hands shook as he worked at his console. Sir, I'm running diagnostics. On our communication logs, the data has been altered. Multiple times, I can see the original messages underneath the changes. But why? Zethkar demanded. Why manipulate us into attacking you? Because we needed to reveal ourselves eventually, and we want to do it in a way that would make the strongest possible impression. Your fleet represents the best the Confederacy has to offer. If we could demonstrate our superiority over you, word would spread throughout Confederate space. Captain Shun paused, then continued. But there's another reason. We needed to test your fleet's capabilities under stress. What's coming to this galaxy will be far worse than anything the Confederacy has ever faced. We needed to know if you were ready. What's coming? Zethkar asked. Long-range sensors have detected a massive fleet approaching from the galactic core. Ships unlike anything in this part of the galaxy. They've been traveling for thousands of years, consuming everything in their path. They'll reach Confederate space in approximately 50 years. The screen changed to show a star map of the galaxy. A red area near the center showed the location of the approaching threat. The scale was enormous. Thousands of star systems were marked as already consumed. The Devourers, Captain Chun said simply. That's what we call them. They don't negotiate. They don't communicate. They don't leave survivors. They arrive in a system, strip it of all useful materials, and move on. Entire civilizations vanish without a trace. Admiral Zethkar studied the map with growing horror. The approaching fleet was massive beyond comprehension. How long have you known about this? We've been tracking them for 300 years. We've been preparing for 300 years. And we've been preparing you for 300 years. Preparing us? Every technology we've shared with the Confederacy was chosen specifically to help you fight the Devourers. Your plasma weapons are effective against their hull materials. Your shield systems can withstand their energy attacks. Your faster-than-light drives will let you retreat and regroup when necessary. Captain Vexthari's voice came over the communication system again. If these Devourers are so dangerous, why didn't you just tell us about them directly? Because you weren't ready to hear it, Captain Sean replied. 300 years ago, the Confederacy was a collection of primitive tribes fighting over single planets. We had to guide your development carefully, helping you become a spacefaring civilization, capable of understanding the threat. The screen changed again, showing historical images of Confederate worlds from centuries past. Primitive cities, early spacecraft, basic weapons. Then the images progressed, showing the steady advancement of Confederate technology over time. We've been your hidden teachers, Captain Sean explained. Every time your scientists made a breakthrough, it was because we left the right clues in the right places. Every time your military developed new tactics, it was because we created scenarios that forced you to adapt. Zethkar looked at the images of his people's history with new understanding. You've been manipulating our entire civilization. We've been guiding your evolution. There's a difference. We never forced you to make specific choices. We simply created situations where the right choices would help you survive what's coming. And if we had made the wrong choices? Captain Shun was quiet for a moment. Then we would have tried a different approach. But your people have consistently chosen to grow stronger rather than remain weak. That's why we believe you can be valuable allies against the Devourers. The communication channel buzzed with voices. From across the Confederate fleet, officers and crew members were discussing what they had heard, trying to process the enormous scope of what had been revealed. There's something else you need to understand, Captain Shun continued. The Confederacy isn't the only civilization we've been guiding. There are 17 other species in this galaxy that we've helped develop. Some are further advanced than you. Others are still in early stages of space travel. All of them will be needed when the Devourers arrive. 17 other species? Sethkar asked. The Hellan Empire in the Outer Rim, the Frex Republic near the galactic edge, the Yalan Collective in the Southern Spiral, and 14 others. Each one guided along a different path of development, each one specializing in different technologies and tactics. The scope of human planning was staggering. For 3 centuries, they had been secretly managing the development of multiple civilizations across the galaxy, all in preparation for a threat that most people didn't even know existed. How are we supposed to trust you after learning that? You've been manipulating us for centuries? Sethkar asked. You don't have to trust us, Captain Sean replied. You just have to decide whether you want to face the Devourers alone or as part of a galactic alliance. The choice is yours. On his screen, Admiral Sethkar could see data streaming from the human ships. Technical specifications, tactical analyses, strategic projections. The information showed that humanity's technology was centuries ahead of anything the Confederacy possessed. Their ships were faster, stronger, and more advanced in every way. But more importantly, the data showed that even with all their advantages, humanity didn't believe they could defeat the Devourers alone. They needed allies. They needed the combined strength of every civilization in the galaxy. What would this alliance require from us? Sethkar asked. Honesty. No more secrets between our peoples. Complete sharing of technology and resources. Joint training exercises to prepare for the real war. And most importantly, trust that we're all working toward the same goal. Captain Vexthari's voice interrupted the conversation. Admiral, I'm receiving requests from crew members across the fleet. They want to know what happens next. Sethkar looked around his bridge. His officers were all watching him, waiting for his decision. The weight of his choice would affect not just his fleet, but potentially the entire Confederacy. Captain Shun, he said slowly, if we agree to this alliance, what happens to Confederate independence? Do we become subjects of humanity? You become partners, Captain Shun replied. Equal partners in defending our galaxy. Humanity has technology and experience. The Confederacy has numbers and strategic position. Together, we might actually have a chance of winning. Admiral Sethkar made his decision. It wasn't just about military tactics or political advantages. It was about survival. Not just for his fleet, not just for the Confederacy, but for every living being in the galaxy. I want to see more, he said. I want to understand everything. Show me what humanity is truly capable of. The first sign that something was wrong came from the medical bay of the Stellar Might. Dr. Kexthara, the ship's chief medical officer, noticed that crew members were arriving with similar symptoms. Shaking hands, rapid breathing, confused thoughts, and a strange inability to focus on simple tasks. Captain Vexthari to medical bay, she called over the communication system. Yes, Captain? Doctor, I'm receiving reports of crew members having difficulty with basic duties. What's your assessment? Dr. Kexthara looked around the medical bay, which was now filled with 23 crew members, all showing the same symptoms. Captain, I've never seen anything like this. It's as if their minds are trying to process information that's too large for them to understand. Across the Confederate fleet, the same thing was happening. On ship after ship, crew members were experiencing what could only be described as mental breakdowns. Not from fear of battle, but from the overwhelming realization of how completely their understanding of reality had been wrong. On the bridge of the Dominion Ascendant, Admiral Sethkar watched his officers struggling with their duties. Jexpol, his sensor officer, kept staring at his instruments as if he couldn't remember how to read them. Sir, Jexpol said, his voice uncertain, I keep looking at these sensor readings. And I can't shake the feeling that everything I learned about sensor technology is wrong. If the humans have been controlling our systems all along, then what else don't I understand? Commander Blexter, the ship's tactical officer, was having similar problems. Admiral, I've been studying Confederate military tactics for 60 years. But if the humans wrote our orders and controlled our communications, then every battle we've ever fought might have been planned by them. How do we know if we actually won any of our victories? The psychological impact was spreading through the fleet like a disease. Crew members who had dedicated their lives to understanding Confederate technology were discovering that their knowledge was based on carefully controlled information. Officers who prided themselves on tactical expertise were learning that their strategies might have been guided by an unseen hand. Captain Sean's voice came over the communication system, addressing the entire Confederate fleet. What you're experiencing is normal. Learning that your understanding of reality is incomplete can be overwhelming. We've seen this reaction in other species when they learn the truth about their development. How do we make it stop? Admiral Zethkar asked. You don't stop it. You work through it. Your minds are trying to process 3 centuries of hidden truth all at once. It takes time. On the destroyer Swift Strike, Captain Mortex was dealing with his own crisis of understanding. His ship's engineer, a brilliant Kitharin named Tekler, had locked himself in his quarters after discovering that the faster-than-light drive he had spent his career perfecting was based on human designs. Captain, Tekler said over the internal communication system, I can't come back to the bridge. Every time I look at our systems, I see human technology. Everything I thought I knew about engineering is wrong. This scene was repeating throughout the fleet. Engineers couldn't trust their knowledge of technology. Navigators questioned their understanding of space travel. Weapons officers wondered if they had ever really been in control of their own guns. Some ships attempted desperate measures to regain a sense of control. The heavy cruiser Iron Fist tried to shut down all its systems and operate on manual backups only. But even the backup systems showed signs of human influence in their design. The battleship Mountain Breaker attempted to destroy its own computer core rather than continue operating with systems under human control. But when the crew tried to access the self-destruct mechanism, they discovered that it too was designed according to human specifications. Captain Chun, Admiral Zethkar called out, his voice strained. My crew is falling apart. Some of them are talking about suicide rather than continue living with the knowledge that our entire civilization is built on human guidance. That's why we usually reveal ourselves more gradually, Captain Chun replied. But you asked for the full demonstration. This is part of it. Your people need to understand that being guided doesn't make them weak. It makes them survivors. How? Can we be survivors when we've never really been in control of our own destiny? Because you made the right choices when it mattered. We could guide your technology and create opportunities, but we couldn't force you to be brave. We couldn't make you choose to explore space instead of staying on your home worlds. We couldn't make you choose cooperation over constant warfare. On the communication channel, voices from across the fleet began to speak up. Captain Vexthari was the first. Admiral, my crew is asking whether our entire military service has been meaningless. Commander Yekshan from the destroyer Quick Wind added, Sir, if humans could control our systems all along, why did they let us fight other species? Why did they let Confederate soldiers die in battles that humans could have prevented? Captain Chun answered before Admiral Zethkar could respond. Because conflict was necessary for your development. Not all species we've encountered chose the path of growth and cooperation. Some chose aggression and conquest. They had to be stopped. By us, Zethkar said, understanding dawning in his voice. By you, we could have intervened directly, but then you would never have learned to defend yourselves. When the Devourers arrive, We won't be able to fight for you. We can fight beside you, but each civilization must be capable of standing on its own. The screen in front of Admiral Zethkar changed to show a star map with marked battle sites. Dozens of Confederate military victories were highlighted, along with details about the species they had fought. The Zelen Empire, Captain Sean explained. They were one of the species we tried to guide. They chose conquest over cooperation. They used the technology we shared with them to enslave other civilizations. What happened to them? You happened to them. The Confederacy defeated them in the War of the Burning Stars. You freed 17 enslaved species and prevented the Zelens from expanding further. Admiral Zethkar remembered that war. It had been one of the Confederacy's greatest victories, a campaign that established them as a major power in their region of the galaxy. The Corvin Collective, Captain Chun continued, another species we tried to help. They decided that other civilizations were inferior and needed to be eliminated for the greater good. The Corvins were destroyed in the Silent Crusade, Zethkar said quietly, by Confederate forces. You saved 42 billion lives across 9 star systems. The pattern became clear as Captain Chun showed more examples. Every major Confederate military campaign had been against species that had chosen aggression over cooperation, species that had taken human guidance and used it for conquest rather than development. You've been testing us, Admiral Zethkar realized, not just preparing us for the Devourers, but testing whether we deserve to survive. Every species faces the same test. We give them tools and opportunities. How they use those gifts determines whether they become allies or threats. And if we had chosen conquest over cooperation? Captain Chun was quiet for a moment. Then the Confederacy would have met the same fate as the Zelens and the Corvins. The weight of that statement settled over the Confederate fleet. They had been one choice away from destruction for 3 centuries, never knowing that they were being judged. But you didn't choose conquest, Captain Chun continued. You chose exploration. You chose to build alliances with other species instead of enslaving them. You chose to defend the weak instead of exploiting them. That's why you're still here. On his bridge, Admiral Zethkar looked around at his officers. They were still struggling with the revelations, but he could see something changing in their expressions. The despair was giving way to something else. Understanding, perhaps. Or acceptance. Captain Chun, he said slowly, you mentioned that we could choose to continue our mission against the human colonies, knowing that you would redirect our attacks. What would happen if we made that choice? You would learn what it feels like to fight against human military technology instead of fighting with human guidance. It would not be a pleasant lesson. And if we choose to withdraw and report back to Confederate High Command, then the gradual revelation process would begin. We would slowly introduce ourselves to your government, share our technology more openly, and begin preparing your entire civilization for what's coming. What about the third option? The full demonstration you mentioned? Captain Chun's ship, the Probability Storm, began to emit a different kind of energy. This time, it wasn't targeting Confederate technology. It was targeting the Confederate crew members themselves. The third option, Captain Chun said, is that we show you what humans are truly capable of. But I must warn you, Admiral, what you're about to experience will change you. You will never be the same after seeing the full scope of human technology. Admiral Zethkar felt a strange tingling sensation in his mind. It was subtle at first, like a gentle touch on his thoughts. Then it grew stronger. What are you doing? He asked. We're offering to share our knowledge directly with your minds, not controlling your thoughts, but showing you the truth about human capabilities, about what we've built, what we've achieved, and what we're... The moment Admiral Zethkar accepted the connection, his mind exploded with new understanding. It wasn't painful, But it was overwhelming. Information flowed into his consciousness like water through a broken dam, but somehow his mind was able to process it all. He saw human space for the first time. Not the handful of colonies the Confederacy knew about, but the real extent of human civilization. Thousands of star systems connected by technology that made Confederate faster than light. Travel looked like primitive rockets. Massive structures built around entire stars, harvesting energy on a scale that dwarfed anything the Confederacy had imagined. Cities that floated in empty space, larger than Confederate planets. Factories that could build starships in minutes instead of years. Research stations that existed in dimensions the Confederacy didn't even know were possible. "This is impossible," Zethkar whispered, but even as he said it, he knew it was real. The knowledge flowing into his mind was too detailed, too complete to be false. On the bridge around him, his officers were having similar experiences. Jexpol gasped as he suddenly understood how human sensors could see through time as well as space. Commander Blexter stared at his tactical display with new comprehension of weapons that could target enemies in parallel universes. Captain Vextharis' voice came over the communication system, but it sounded different. Calmer, more confident. "Admiral, I'm seeing human ship designs that can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their smallest patrol craft are more powerful than our largest battleships." Across the Confederate fleet, crew members were experiencing the same transformation. Engineers suddenly understood technologies that could reshape matter at the atomic level. Navigators learned about travel methods that didn't require moving through normal space at all. Medical officers discovered healing techniques that could repair any injury, even death itself. But the most shocking revelation was the scope of human influence. Admiral Zethkar saw the truth about galactic history. Humans hadn't just been guiding the Confederacy for 3 centuries. They had been managing the development of the entire galaxy for millennia. Every major civilization, every technological breakthrough, every peaceful alliance between species, all of it had been carefully orchestrated by humanity to prepare for the coming threat. "You've been managing the entire galaxy," Zethkar said in amazement. Captain Chun's voice seemed to come from inside his mind now, a side effect of the neural connection. "Not managing, gardening. We've been helping life grow where it could flourish, protecting it from threats, and guiding it towards strength and wisdom." The connection showed Zethkar more than just technology and history. It showed him human philosophy, their understanding of life and purpose. He saw that humans didn't consider themselves superior to other species. They saw themselves as caretakers, responsible for helping younger civilizations reach their potential. "Why?" he asked. "Why take on such responsibility?" "Because someone has to," Captain Chun replied. "The universe is vast and dangerous. Life is rare and precious. Those who have the power to protect and guide life have the responsibility to do so." Admiral Zethkar felt his fundamental understanding of morality shifting. The Confederacy had always believed in strength through conquest, in taking what they needed from weaker species. But humanity operated on a completely different principle. They believed in strength through cooperation, in making everyone stronger together. "The Devourers," Captain Chun continued, "represent the opposite philosophy. They believe that only the strongest deserve to survive, and that everything else exists only to feed their strength. They've consumed entire galactic clusters, leaving nothing but empty space behind." Through the neural connection, Zethkar saw images of the Devourer's path of destruction. Solar systems stripped of all matter, entire species extinct, worlds reduced to cosmic dust. The scale of devastation was beyond anything the Confederacy had ever imagined. "They're coming here," he said. "In 50 years, their advanced scouts will reach Confederate space. In 60 years, their main fleet will arrive. By then, every species in this galaxy must be ready to fight, or we'll all share the fate of the Outer Rim civilizations. The connection showed Zethkar the Outer Rim, the edge of the galaxy where the Devourers had already struck. Thousands of star systems that had once hosted thriving civilizations were now empty void. Not even debris remained. Everything had been consumed and converted into more Devourer ships. How do we fight something like that? Zethkar asked. Together, Captain Shun replied. Every species contributing their unique strengths. Every world working toward the same goal. Every ship in the galaxy operating as part of a single, coordinated defense. Through the neural link, Admiral Zethkar began to understand the plan humanity had been working toward for millennia. It wasn't just about building stronger weapons or faster ships. It was about creating a galactic civilization that could work together despite the differences between species. The Confederacy will need to change, he realized. Every civilization will need to change. Old rivalries must be set aside. Territorial disputes must be resolved. Resources must be shared freely. The survival of all life in the galaxy depends on perfect cooperation. Zethkar saw how this would work. Confederate mining operations would provide raw materials for human shipyards. Frex Republic scientists would work alongside Kithering engineers. Yalin military tactics would be combined with human technology. Every species would contribute what they did best. What about those who refused to cooperate? He asked. Captain Sean's mental voice carried a note of sadness. Then they'll face the Devourers alone, and they'll lose. The neural connection began to fade, but the knowledge remained. Admiral Zethkar found that he could still access the information he had been shown, though it no longer overwhelmed his mind. Around him, his officers were looking at their instruments with new understanding. "Admiral," Jexpol said, his voice filled with wonder, "I can see how to modify our sensors to detect Devourer technology. The principles are complex, but I understand them now." "Sir," added Commander Blackster, "I can see tactical formations that would let Confederate ships fight alongside human vessels with perfect coordination." Similar reports came in from across the fleet. Every crew member who had experienced the neural connection now possessed knowledge that would have taken decades to learn through normal study. But more importantly, they understood the purpose behind that knowledge. "Captain Shun," Admiral Zithkar said, "my crew and I want to be part of this alliance, but I can't speak for the entire Confederacy." "We understand. That's why the revelation process will be gradual for your government. But your fleet can serve as an example. You can show your leaders what cooperation with humanity can accomplish." On the main screen, Admiral Zethkar could see the human ships that surrounded his fleet. But now he understood what he was looking at. These weren't just warships. They were mobile research stations, factory ships, and diplomatic vessels, all combined into single, multi-purpose craft that could serve any function needed. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you return to Confederate space and begin the process of preparing your people. We'll provide you with advanced technology and training. In return, you'll help us contact other Confederate fleets and begin the integration process." Integration? The gradual combining of human and Confederate forces into a single military organization. It will take years to complete, but when the Devourers arrive, every ship in the galaxy will be part of a unified defense fleet. "Admiral." Zethkar looked around his bridge one more time. His officers were no longer the same people they had been an hour ago. They had seen the true scope of the universe and understood their place in it. They were no longer just Confederate military personnel. They were now part of something much larger. "There's one more thing you should know," Captain Shun said. "Your fleet isn't the only one we're revealing ourselves to today." At this moment, Human ships are making contact with Confederate forces in 17 different systems. The age of secrecy is ending across your entire civilization. How will the Confederate government react? Some leaders will resist. They'll see cooperation with humanity as a threat to their power. Others will understand the necessity and work with us. The process won't be smooth, but it will be necessary. On his tactical display, Admiral Zethkar could see new information appearing. Fleet movements throughout Confederate space, showing other human ships making contact with other Confederate forces. The scope of the operation was enormous. "Captain Chun," he said, "there's something I need to ask. After everything you've shown us, after all the knowledge you've shared, what guarantee do we have that humans won't eventually decide that other species are no longer necessary?" "The same guarantee that has protected you for 3 centuries," Captain Chun replied. "Our fundamental belief that diversity makes us stronger. Humanity could have conquered the galaxy at any time, but conquest would have made us weaker, not stronger. We need your unique perspectives, your different ways of thinking, your varied approaches to problem solving. And after the Devourers are defeated, then we'll face the next challenge together. The universe is full of wonders and dangers we haven't encountered yet. We'll need every ally we can find." The morning sky above New York City turned black, not from clouds or storms, but from something much worse. Giant ships blocked out the sun, ships so big that each one covered entire city blocks. There were hundreds of them, floating in the air, like metal mountains. People stopped walking on the streets. Cars crashed into each other as drivers looked up instead of watching the road. Children pointed at the sky and asked their parents what was happening. But the parents did not know either. The ships were not from Earth. They were alien ships. Ships from the Zephyrian Galactic Empire. The Empire ruled over 10,000 different worlds scattered across the galaxy. They had been conquering planets for over 1,000,000 years. Now they had come to Earth. Admiral Kethver stood on the bridge of his flagship. He was tall and covered in green scales like a lizard. His yellow eyes looked down at the blue planet below. Earth looked so small and weak compared to his mighty fleet. He had destroyed many worlds like this one. Earth would be just another easy victory. "Send the message," Kethver ordered his communications officer. All across Earth, every television, screen, radio, and computer suddenly showed the same thing. The scaly face of Admiral Kethver appeared on billions of screens at once. When he spoke, his voice was cold and full of power. "People of Earth," the Admiral said, "I am Admiral Kethver of the Zephyrian Galactic Empire. Your small world now belongs to us. You have exactly 72 hours to surrender completely. Put down all weapons. Stop all resistance. Accept our rule without question." The Admiral paused and smiled, showing sharp white teeth. "If you do not surrender in 72 hours, we will destroy every city on your planet. We will turn your oceans to steam and your mountains to dust. This is not a threat. This is a promise. We have done this to 100 worlds before you." A message ended. The screens went black. Then chaos began. In Washington, D.C., the president gathered his top advisors in an underground bunker. General Morrison, the head of Earth's military forces, looked at the reports coming in from around the world. Every major city had alien ships floating above it. London, Tokyo, Moscow, Berlin, Mumbai, all of them were covered by the shadow of the Empire's fleet. "How many ships do they have?" the president asked. "Our satellites count over 800 large vessels," General Morrison replied. "Each one is bigger than our largest aircraft carrier. And that's just what we can see. There might be more." The president rubbed his tired eyes. "What about our own fleet? The space stations? The lunar bases? All destroyed in the first hour, the general said quietly. They hit everything we had in space before they even talked to us. We have nothing left up there. Around the world, people ran through the streets in panic. Some tried to escape to the countryside. Others gathered in churches and temples to pray. Many just stood and stared at the ships above, too shocked to move, but not everyone was panicking. In a secret meeting room beneath the Pentagon, Dr. Sarah Chun sat at a long table with 12 other people. These were the leaders of the Terran Defense Initiative. They had been preparing for this day for 50 years. Ever since humans first learned, they were not alone in the universe. Dr. Chun was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. She had spent her whole life working on Earth's most secret project. While the world above fell into chaos, she remained perfectly still. The alien fleet matches our predictions, she said to the others around the table. They think we are weak and helpless. They believe we have no real defenses, don't we? Asked Colonel Rivera, one of the military representatives. Our entire space fleet is gone. We have no orbital weapons, no planetary shields. What can we possibly do against 800 alien warships? Dr. Chun smiled for the first time that day. We can show them why our ancestors chose to sleep. The other people at the table nodded. They all knew about Project Prometheus. They had all spent years preparing for this moment. Now the time had come to wake up something that had been sleeping for 10,000 years. I need authorization from all departments, Dr. Chun said. Defense, energy, communications, and deep ocean research. Once we start this, we cannot stop it. Are you all ready? One by one, each person at the table pressed their thumb to a small red scanner. Lights flashed green as each authorization was accepted. When all 12 lights were green, Dr. Chun stood up. Project Prometheus is now active, she announced. May God help us all. Far beneath the Pacific Ocean, deeper than any human had ever traveled, something began to stir. Ancient machines that had waited in the darkness for centuries started to wake up. Lights that had been off for 10,000 years began to glow. Meanwhile, Admiral Kethver walked through his ship, inspecting his troops. The Zephyrian soldiers were tall and strong, with tough scales that could stop most weapons. They carried energy rifles that could melt steel. Each soldier had fought in dozens of battles across the galaxy. Sir, one of his officers reported, we are detecting some unusual energy readings from the planet. What kind of readings? The Admiral asked. Unknown, sir. They seem to be coming from deep underground and under the oceans. Our computers cannot identify the energy source. Kethver looked at the data on his screen. The readings showed massive power sources scattered across Earth's surface. But they were unlike anything in the Empire's vast database of alien technologies. Probably just their primitive power plants, the Admiral decided. These humans only learned to travel between stars 50 years ago. They cannot have anything dangerous. The officer looked worried. Sir, the energy levels are enormous. Much larger than anything their known technology should be able to produce. Relax, Kethver said with a laugh. I have conquered races that could control gravity itself. I have destroyed civilizations that built worlds from pure energy. These humans are nothing special. In 72 hours, they will kneel before the Empire just like all the others. Deep in the ocean, Dr. Chun stood in an elevator that was falling faster than any elevator had ever moved. She was descending toward a place that officially did not exist. A place where humanity's greatest secret waited in the darkness. The elevator finally stopped, miles beneath the ocean floor. Doors opened to reveal a vast underground facility carved from solid rock. Hundreds of scientists and technicians were already at their stations, preparing for what was about to happen. In the center of the facility stood a massive chamber filled with swirling mist. Inside the mist, something huge was beginning to move. something that had been waiting patiently for this day to come. Dr. Chun walked to the main control panel and placed her hand on a scanner. A computer voice spoke. Identity confirmed. Dr. Sarah Chun, Director of Terran Defense Initiative. Please state your authorization code. Authorization code, Prometheus 77 Alpha. Dr. Chun said clearly. Begin awakening sequence. Priority. Alpha. This is not a drill. The computer was silent for a moment. Then, awakening sequence initiated. Estimated time to full activation, 68 hours, 43 minutes. Dr. Chun smiled as she watched the mist in the chamber begin to glow. The aliens thought they had 72 hours to wait for Earth's surrender. They had no idea that humanity was about to show them something they had never seen before. Something they would never forget. Something that would change the galaxy forever. Admiral Kethver walked through the halls of his flagship, remembering his past victories. The walls were covered with pictures and trophies from 100 conquered worlds. Each one told the story of another species that had fallen before the might of the Zephyrian Empire. He stopped in front of his favorite picture. It showed the crystal cities of Altair Prime, burning in beautiful colors as his plasma cannons destroyed them. The Altairians had been proud and intelligent. They built cities that looked like giant diamonds reaching toward the stars. But their beauty could not save them from the Empire's power. The Altairians lasted 6 days, Kethver said to himself. They had good shields and fast ships. But in the end, they knelt like all the others. He moved to another picture. This one showed the orbital defense platforms around Kepler Station, exploding in bright flashes. The Kepler colonists had been clever engineers. They built weapons that could destroy asteroids and shields that could stop solar flares. Their defense satellites were the best the Admiral had ever seen. Kepler Station held out for almost 6 hours, he remembered. Their weapons were impressive. But 6 hours is not very long when you have eternity. The Admiral continued walking, looking at more pictures. The floating cities of Aquarius, the underground fortresses of Titan Colony, the living forests of Green World that could think and fight back. All of them had something special. All of them had believed they could resist. The Empire. All of them had been wrong. On the bridge of his ship, junior officers were studying the scans of Earth. Lieutenant Zaktar, a young officer with bright green scales, was looking at the energy readings with confusion. "Sir," he said to Commander Velahan, "these readings from Earth are very strange." Commander Velahan was older and more experienced. He had gray scales and scars from many battles. "What do you mean, Lieutenant?" "Look at these underground networks," Zaktar pointed to his screen. "They go everywhere, under all the continents, under all the oceans, and the energy signatures are enormous." Velahan looked at the data. The young officer was right. There were massive tunnel systems beneath Earth's surface. They formed patterns that looked almost like blood vessels in a giant body. And the energy readings were stronger than anything their scanners had ever detected. It must be natural, Velahan decided. Geological formations. Underground. Rivers. Maybe volcanic activity. "But sir," Zaktar continued, "the patterns are too regular, too organized. And this energy signature here." He pointed to a reading from deep in the Pacific Ocean. "It's artificial. I'm sure of it." Commander Velahan frowned. In all his years of conquest, he had learned to trust his instincts. And right now, his instincts were telling him something was wrong. But the Admiral had already made up his mind. About Earth, these humans were primitives. They had only been traveling between stars for 50 years. What could they possibly have that would threaten the Empire? "Run a deep scan," Velahan ordered. "Focus on the areas with the strongest energy readings." While the aliens studied their scans, Earth continued to panic. News reporters stood in front. of cameras, trying to explain what was happening while alien ships floated in the sky behind them. "This is Rebecca Martinez reporting from downtown Los Angeles," one reporter said, her voice shaking. "The alien ships have been here for 6 hours now. The government is asking everyone to stay calm and wait for instructions. But as you can see behind me, many people are not staying calm." The camera showed crowds of people running through the streets. Some carried suitcases and bags, trying to escape the city. Others stood in groups, pointing at the ships and arguing about what to do. Police cars drove around with loudspeakers, asking people to go home and stay inside. In Moscow, the Russian president was meeting with his generals. In Beijing, the Chinese premier was talking to his advisors. In London, the British Prime Minister was holding an emergency session of Parliament. Every government on Earth was trying to figure out what to do. But they all came to the same conclusion. Earth had no way to fight the alien fleet. What they did not know was that other meetings were happening in secret, deep underground, in hidden facilities around the world. The Terran Defense Initiative was preparing for something the aliens could never imagine, not in a bunker beneath Mount Cheyenne. Dr. James Wright was watching dozens of computer screens. Dr. Wright was in charge of the North American defense grid. For 30 years, he had been waiting for this day. "All sectors report ready," he said into his radio. "The grid is charging on schedule." Similar reports came in from around the world. Dr. Yamamoto in Japan confirmed that the Pacific Ring systems were online. Dr. Volkov in Siberia reported that the Arctic installations were awakening. Dr. Patel in India said the Himalayan network was responding perfectly. Each of these facilities was connected to the others by tunnels that ran through the Earth's core. Tunnels that had been built by an ancient civilization that had once lived on Earth. A civilization that had decided to sleep rather than destroy the galaxy in a war that would never end. Back on the alien flagship, the deep scans were complete. Lieutenant Zakhtar stared at his screen in shock. The readings were impossible. The energy sources beneath Earth were not just big, they were massive beyond understanding. Each one was like a star contained in a small space. "Commander Valahan," he called out, his voice full of worry. "You need to see this." Commander Valahan hurried over to look at the screen. What he saw made his blood run cold. The deep scans showed that the tunnel networks were not natural at all. They were built, carefully designed, and they were all connected to enormous machines buried deep in the Earth. "What are those things?" Valahan whispered. "I don't know, sir," Zakhtar replied. "But they're not like anything in our database. The technology it's beyond our understanding." Valahan knew he had to report this to Admiral Kethver immediately. But he also knew the Admiral would not want to hear it. Kethver had already decided that Earth was weak. He would not appreciate being told he might be wrong. Meanwhile, Admiral Kethver was in his private chambers, polishing his collection of weapons. Each weapon had been taken from a defeated enemy. The crystal sword of an Altarian prince, the plasma lance of a Kepler general, the living blade of a green world tree warrior. Soon he would add human weapons to his collection. Though from what he had seen, human weapons were primitive. Metal bullets and explosive missiles. Nothing compared to the energy weapons of the Empire. It would be a disappointment, really. He enjoyed collecting weapons from worthy enemies. But the humans did not seem worthy. A messenger entered his chamber. "Admiral, Commander Valahan requests an urgent meeting." "Tell him to wait," Kethver said without looking up from his weapons. "I am busy." "Sir? He says it's about the energy readings from Earth. He seems very concerned." Kethver sighed. Young officers were always worried about something. They saw danger everywhere. It came from not having enough experience. Once Valahan had conquered a few more worlds, he would learn to relax. Very well, the Admiral said. Send him in. Commander Velahan entered the chamber with Lieutenant Zakhtar behind him. Both officers looked nervous and frightened. Admiral, Velahan began, we have completed deep scans of Earth. The results are ... disturbing. Kethver continued polishing his crystal sword. Disturbing how? The humans have massive installations beneath their planet, machines we cannot identify, energy sources more powerful than our own reactors. The technology appears to be far more advanced than anything we have encountered. Now Kethver looked up. Impossible. These humans only achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago. Our intelligence reports are very clear about this. Yes, sir, Zakhtar said nervously. But what if our intelligence is wrong? What if? The humans are not what they appear to be? Admiral Kethvar stood up, his tall form towering over the two officers. His yellow eyes glowed with anger. Are you suggesting that the mighty Zephyrian Empire, conqueror of 10,000 worlds, has been fooled by a primitive species? Are you saying that our intelligence network, which spans the entire galaxy, has somehow missed the fact that these humans possess advanced technology? Sir, I'm just reporting what our scans show, Velian said carefully. Your scans are wrong, Kethver declared. Equipment malfunctions, computer errors, perhaps interference from their primitive satellites. Run the scans again? We have run them 3 times, sir. The results are the same. Kethver walked to his window and looked down at Earth. The blue planet looked so peaceful, so helpless, just like dozens of other worlds he had conquered. There was nothing special about it. Commander Velahan, he said slowly, in my 500 years of service to the Empire, I have conquered 73 worlds. I have faced species that could control time itself. I have defeated civilizations that built their cities inside black holes. Do you really think a species that still uses chemical rockets poses any threat to me? No, sir, Velahan replied quietly. Then, stop worrying about computer errors and prepare for the bombardment. In 64 hours, this conversation will seem very silly. The two officers left the Admiral's chamber, but their worries remained. Something was wrong with Earth. Something. Their computers could. 72 hours had passed. The deadline was over. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue planet below. Earth had not surrendered. He had expected this. Most species tried to resist at first. They always thought they could fight the Empire. They were always wrong. All ships, prepare for orbital bombardment, the Admiral commanded. Target major population centers first. Let them see what happens to those who defy the Empire. 800 alien warships turned their weapons toward Earth. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy entire mountains. Together, they could turn the planet's surface into molten glass within hours. Fire, Kethver ordered. Thousands of plasma beams shot down from the sky. Each beam was hot enough to melt steel instantly. They struck the cities of Earth with the force of lightning bolts from angry gods. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, all were targeted by the Empire's terrible weapons. But something impossible happened. The plasma beams simply vanished. They hit Earth's atmosphere and disappeared like raindrops falling into an ocean. The cities below remained untouched. Not a single building was damaged. Not a single person was hurt. What? Admiral Kethver stared at his screen in shock. Fire again. Full power. The second volley was even stronger than the first. Every ship in the fleet fired at once. The space around Earth lit up like a new sun as thousands of energy weapons discharged. Their deadly cargo again. The beams vanished harmlessly. It was as if Earth was protected by invisible shields that could absorb unlimited amounts of energy. Impossible, Kethver whispered. No shield technology can do that. Nothing can absorb that much power. On Earth, people stood in the streets looking up at the sky. They had seen the flashes of light as the alien weapons fired. They had braced themselves for death. But nothing happened. The weapons of the mighty Zephyrian Empire had been completely useless in the secret facility beneath the Pacific Ocean. Dr. Sarah Chun watched her instruments with satisfaction. The planetary defense grid was working perfectly. Energy that should have destroyed continents was being absorbed and redirected into the awakening process. How much longer? She asked her assistant. 14 minutes until full activation, came the reply. Dr. Chun nodded. 14 minutes until the galaxy remembered. Why certain worlds should never be disturbed. On the alien flagship, panic was beginning to spread. Commander Velohan ran from station to station, checking the weapon systems. Everything showed green. The plasma cannons were working perfectly, but their shots were having no effect on the planet below. "Sir," Lieutenant Zakhtar called out, his voice full of fear. "We're detecting massive energy spikes from the planet's oceans." "Where?" Kethvar demanded. "Everywhere, sir. Pacific, Atlantic, Indian Ocean, Arctic. Something is rising from the deep ocean floors." Admiral Kethvar looked at the main screen. At first, he saw nothing but water. Then, slowly, shapes began to appear beneath the surface. Huge shapes. Shapes that made his massive warships look like toys by comparison. "What are those things?" he asked quietly. The shapes rose higher, breaking through the surface of Earth's oceans. Water cascaded off their surfaces like waterfalls falling from mountains. They were not ships as the aliens understood ships. They were something else entirely. Something that defied all laws of physics and engineering. Each structure was the size of a small moon. Their surfaces were covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change as you looked at them. They glowed with an inner light that was not quite any color the aliens had ever seen. "Scanning," reported the science officer. "Sir, these objects they're not made of any known material. The scanners can't even determine what they are. They're solid, but they're also energy. They're real, but they're also something else." More shapes rose from the oceans. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Each one was different, but all of them shared the same impossible combination of matter and energy that made the aliens' computers scream error messages. In the deep facility, Dr. Chun spoke into her microphone. "This is Terran Command to all. Guardian units, you are clear to fully manifest. Repeat, you are clear to fully manifest." The massive structures in Earth's oceans began to change. Parts of them became transparent. Other parts became solid as diamond. Tentacles of pure energy reached out from their surfaces, stretching across impossible distances, to gently touch the hulls of the alien ships. Where the energy tentacles touched, something remarkable happened. The alien ships' weapons stopped working. Their engines went quiet. Their computers began displaying information in languages that had been dead for millions of years. Admiral Kethvar watched in horror as his mighty fleet was rendered helpless by technology he could not understand. His ships were not being destroyed. They were being examined, studied, analyzed by intelligence so vast that his entire fleet was nothing more than an interesting collection of toys. "Retreat," he ordered. "All ships retreat immediately." But the ships could not move. The energy tentacles held them gently but firmly, not crushing them, not hurting them, just keeping them exactly where they were. On Earth, every television screen, radio, and computer suddenly activated. But instead of showing alien messages, they showed a human face. Fleet Admiral Zhang of the Terran Defense Force appeared on billions of screens around the world. "Citizens of Earth," Admiral Zhang said calmly, "the immediate threat has been neutralized. The alien fleet is no longer capable of harming our world. I want to assure everyone that you are safe." He paused and looked directly into the camera. "I also want to send a message to any other members of the Zephyrian Empire who might be listening. You came to our world demanding surrender. You threatened to destroy our cities and kill our people. Instead, you have awakened something that has been sleeping for 10,000 years. The view on the screens changed to show the massive structures rising from Earth's oceans. The structures were fully manifested now, their impossible geometry clearly visible against the blue sky. "These are not weapons we built," Admiral Zhang continued. "These are what we become when the galaxy threatens our home. For 10 millennia, humanity has chosen to sleep rather than interfere with the natural development of galactic civilization. But when empires grow too large and threaten the freedom of innocent worlds, we wake up. In the alien archives, deep in the Empire's capital world, ancient computers began accessing files that had not been opened in a million years. Warning files. Files written in the earliest days of the Empire, when their ancestors first began to explore the galaxy. The files spoke of the gardeners, ancient beings who had once tended the galaxy like a vast garden, preventing any single species from growing too powerful. The files told of worlds that were never to be disturbed. Worlds where the gardeners slept, waiting for the day when they would be needed again. And at the top of the list of forbidden worlds was a small blue planet in a quiet spiral arm of the galaxy. A planet called Earth. Commander Velahan accessed these files from his ship's computer. As he read, his scaled face turned pale with terror. "Admiral," he called out, his voice barely a whisper. "Admiral, you need to see this." But Admiral Kethfer was no longer listening to his officers. He was staring at his main screen, watching as one of the massive structures moved closer to his flagship. It moved without engines, without thrust, simply willing itself through space as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions. The structure stopped just in front of his ship. A section of its surface became transparent, revealing the interior. Inside, Admiral Kethvar could see a figure sitting in what appeared to be a command chair. The figure was human, but not quite human. It was taller, more graceful, with eyes that held the wisdom of ages. The being spoke, and its voice was heard throughout the alien fleet without need for radio transmission. It spoke directly into their minds, in their own language. "I am Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Guardian Corps," the being said. "You have made a mistake. You believed Earth was defenseless. You thought humanity was weak. You assumed we were primitives who could be easily conquered." The being stood up from its chair, and the aliens could see that it was both human and something far more than human. "Humanity is not Earth's first intelligent species," Captain Chun continued. "We are its inheritors. When our predecessors realized their technology had become too powerful, they chose to transform themselves into guardians of galactic peace. They became us, and we have been sleeping, waiting for the day when an empire would grow large enough to threaten the freedom of all worlds." She gestured toward the alien fleet. "That day has come. Throughout the galaxy, on worlds controlled by the Zephyrian Empire, ancient monitoring stations that had been silent for millennia suddenly activated. Signals were sent to other sleeping worlds. Other Guardian units began to wake up. "Your empire's time of expansion is over," Captain Chun announced. "Not through destruction, but through choice. You will withdraw from all conquered worlds. You will allow the species you have enslaved to govern themselves. You will return to your home system and learn to live in peace with your neighbors." "Admiral," Kethfer found his voice at last. "And if we refuse?" The being that had once been Dr. Sarah Chun smiled sadly. "Then you will learn why the ancient files in your archives list Earth as a world that must." What rose from Earth's oceans was beyond anything the Zephyrian Empire had ever encountered in their million years of conquest. The massive structures were not built. They were grown. They were not machines. They were alive in ways that made. The alien scientists' minds hurt to contemplate. Admiral Kethvar watched from his bridge as the nearest Guardian structure approached his flagship. The thing was impossible to look at directly. Parts of it seemed solid as metal, while other sections flickered in and out of reality like mirages. Surfaces that appeared smooth from a distance revealed themselves to be covered in millions of moving parts, each no larger than a grain of sand, all working together in patterns too complex to understand. "What are our weapons doing to it?" Kethvar demanded. "Nothing, sir," reported his weapons officer. "Our plasma cannons pass right through it. The energy beams don't even slow down. They just go through the structure as if it wasn't there." "Then, how is it solid enough to touch our ships?" "I don't know, sir. According to our sensors, it's both there and not there at the same time." Commander Vueland stared at his instruments in disbelief. The Guardian structure was somehow existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Parts of it were in normal space, where they could be seen and felt. Other parts existed in realms of reality that their science could not even detect, let alone understand. From the Guardian structure, tentacles of pure energy reached out toward the pride of Zephyr. The tentacles were beautiful and terrible at the same time, streams of light that moved like living things, reaching across the vacuum of space as if distance meant nothing to them. When the first tentacle touched the hull of Admiral Kethvar's ship, something extraordinary happened. The alien metal began to sing dot. It was not sound as they understood it. The hull vibrated with frequencies that bypassed their ears and spoke directly to their minds. The song was hauntingly beautiful, but it carried undertones of such sadness and loss that several crew members began to weep without knowing why. "What's happening to our ship?" Kethvar asked, his voice shaking. Lieutenant Zakhtar checked his instruments with trembling claws. "Sir, the Guardian it's reading our ship. Not just scanning it, reading it. Every piece of information stored in our computers. Every battle we've fought. Every world we've conquered. It knows everything about us." The song from the ship's hull grew louder. Now the aliens could hear voices in it, the voices of species they had conquered. The crystal beings of Altair Prime, singing their death songs as their cities burned. The engineers of Kepler Station, calling out warnings that no one would hear. The tree folk of Green World, whispering ancient poems as their forests died. "Admiral," Kethvar realized with growing horror that the Guardian was not just reading their ship's data files. It was reading the memories stored in the metal itself. Every act of destruction, every moment of conquest, every cry of the defeated. It was all recorded in the molecular structure of their weapons and hull plating. On the bridge, displays that should have shown tactical information instead showed images from their past campaigns. The aliens watched themselves destroying world after world, seeing their actions through the eyes of their victims for the first time. "Make it stop," Kethvar whispered. "Please, make it stop." But the Guardian was not finished. More tentacles reached out to other ships in the fleet. Each vessel began to sing its own song of conquest and destruction. 800 ships, 800 different melodies of war and death, all harmonizing into a symphony of galactic suffering dot in the deep facility beneath Earth. Dr. Sarah Chun, or the being she had become, watched the process with sad but determined eyes. She was no longer entirely human. The transformation had changed her in ways that went beyond physical form. She could feel the pain of every world the Empire had conquered. She could hear the cries of billions of beings who had died under Zephyrian rule. "Captain," said her aide, who had also undergone the transformation, "the memory integration is complete. The entire fleet's history has been catalogued." "Good," Captain Sean replied, her voice carrying harmonics that had not existed in human speech before. Now they will understand what they have done. Show them the true cost of their empire. Throughout the alien fleet, the ship's computers began displaying information that had never been recorded in their official histories. The actual number of beings killed during their conquests. The civilizations wiped out completely, with no survivors to remember their names. The planets stripped of resources until they could no longer support life. The official Zephyrian records claimed they had conquered 73 worlds and ruled over 10,000 systems. The truth was far worse. They had destroyed over 300 civilizations completely. They had caused the extinction of thousands of species. They had turned 100 worlds into lifeless rocks. Admiral Kethver stared at the numbers scrolling across his screen. "This can't be right," he said. "We are civilizers. We bring order to chaos. We unite the galaxy under one peaceful rule." Captain Chun's voice spoke directly into his mind, bypassing his ship's communication systems entirely. "You brought peace through fear, order through oppression, unity through the destruction of diversity. Look at what you have truly accomplished." The main screen on Admiral Kethver's bridge changed to show a map of the galaxy. But this was not the map taught in Zephyrian schools. This map showed the galaxy as it had been before the Empire began its expansion. It was beautiful. Thousands of different civilizations, each with their own unique culture and technology. Trade routes connecting distant worlds. Art and music and literature flowing freely between species. Scientific discoveries shared across the stars. A galaxy full of life and wonder and infinite possibility. Then the map began to change, showing the Empire's expansion over time. With each conquest, the beautiful diversity faded a little more. Unique cultures were replaced by Zephyrian law. Different ways of thinking were eliminated in favor of imperial orthodoxy. The galaxy became more orderly, more peaceful, and infinitely more empty. "We brought stability." Admiral Kethver protested weakly. "You brought death," Captain Chun replied. "And now it ends." Around Earth, more Guardian structures were fully manifesting. Each one was different, reflecting the unique nature of the consciousness that controlled it. Some appeared as vast geometric forms that hurt to look at directly. Others seemed like living mountains that breathed starlight. A few took shapes that seemed almost familiar until you realized they were cities or forests or oceans that existed in dimensions the mind could not grasp. The structures were not attacking the alien fleet. They were simply present. Their existence was enough to render the Empire's weapons useless and their ships immobile. The Guardians radiated a field that somehow made violence impossible within their vicinity. But across the galaxy, the effects were spreading. On every world controlled by the Zephyrian Empire, the enslaved populations began to feel something they had not experienced in centuries. Hope. Ancient communication networks, dormant for millennia, activated across the galaxy. Signals traveled faster than light itself, carrying a simple message to every oppressed world. The Guardians have awakened. Freedom is coming. On Altair Prime, the surviving crystal beings felt the vibrations in their planet's core and knew their long imprisonment was ending. On the remains of Kepler Station, automated systems that had hidden in the asteroid belts for decades began broadcasting independence declarations. On Green World, the few tree folk that had survived underground sent out route signals to distant forest worlds. The rebellion did not involve weapons or armies. It was something far more powerful, the collective will of free beings refusing to be slaves any longer. Admiral Kethver felt his empire crumbling around him as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Governors were losing control of their sectors. Garrison fleets were finding their weapon systems mysteriously failing. Enslaved populations were simply walking away from their work assignments, knowing somehow that the Empire could no longer harm them. "Sir," Commander Velahan reported, his voice hollow with defeat. "We're receiving surrender requests from 47 sector governors. They're asking for permission to withdraw from their assigned worlds." Surrender requests? Kethver could not believe what he was hearing. From our own governors? They say their weapons won't work anymore. Their ships can't leave orbit, and the populations they've been controlling are. Well, they're acting as if the Empire no longer exists. Captain. Chun's voice spoke to the entire alien fleet at once. Your empire expanded through fear and violence. When those tools are taken away, what remains? Look around you. Your own people are choosing freedom over conquest. Your governors are choosing peace over oppression. Even your warriors are laying down their weapons. It was true. Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, soldiers were setting aside their energy rifles. Not because they were forced to, but because the weapons no longer felt right in their hands. The Guardian field was not controlling their minds. It was simply making them aware of choices they had always had, but never considered. Admiral Kethver realized he was witnessing the end of everything he had ever known. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000,000 years was dissolving not through military defeat, but through a collective awakening of conscience. 1 year later, the galaxy was a very different place. Admiral Kethver sat in his small garden on Zephyr Prime, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. His garden was modest, just a few flowering plants and a small pond. But it was his own, grown by his own hands rather than conquered from others. He was no longer an admiral. That title belonged to the old empire, which had disbanded itself 6 months ago. Now he was simply Kethver, a retired soldier learning to find meaning in peace instead of war. The transformation had not been easy. For 500 years, his entire identity had been built around conquest and domination. Without those things, he had felt lost and empty. But slowly, with help from former enemies who had shown him surprising compassion, he was learning new ways to live. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Kethvar activated his communication device and saw the face of Captain Chun appear in the holographic display. She looked more human now than she had during those first terrifying days when the Guardians had awakened. But her eyes still held depths of knowledge that spoke of experiences beyond normal existence. "Hello, Kethver," she said with a gentle smile. "How are you adjusting to civilian life?" "Better than I expected," he admitted. "Though some days are harder than others. I keep expecting to receive military orders, only to remember that there is no military anymore." "That must be difficult," Captain Chun said with genuine sympathy. "Change is never easy, especially such fundamental change." Kethver nodded. "Captain, may I ask you something?" "Of course. Why didn't you destroy us? Your Guardians had the power to eliminate the entire empire in minutes. Why did you choose rehabilitate us instead?" Captain Chun was quiet for a moment before answering. "Because destruction was the Empire's way. It was never ours. The Guardians exist to preserve life and diversity, not to eliminate it. Even your species has unique value and potential. We simply needed to help you remember that conquering others is not the only path to greatness." Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place. Former Imperial governors were learning to become advisors rather than rulers. Zephyrian soldiers were retraining as peacekeepers and disaster relief workers. Scientists who had once designed weapons were now focused on healing the environmental damage their empire had caused. It was not a perfect transformation. Some former Imperials struggled with the new reality. A few had tried to restart the old ways of conquest, only to find their weapons mysteriously failing whenever they attempted violence against others. The Guardian network that now spanned the galaxy ensured that large-scale warfare was simply no longer possible. On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chun stood in the same underground facility where the awakening had begun. But she was no longer quite the same person who had descended into these depths a year ago. The transformation into a guardian had changed her in ways both profound and subtle. "Status report," she requested from her aide. "All liberation operations are complete," came the reply. "The last of the occupied worlds declared independence 3 days ago. Former imperial territories are now governed by freely elected councils representing the native populations. And the Zephyrians themselves? Adapting better than we hoped. Most have embraced the transition to peaceful civilization. Their natural intelligence and organizational skills are proving quite valuable in rebuilding the worlds they once conquered." Dr. Chun nodded with satisfaction. The Guardians had not sought to punish the Zephyrians, but to redirect their considerable abilities toward positive ends. It was remarkable how quickly a warrior species could adapt when given the chance to be builders instead of destroyers. On the former imperial capital world, the great palace where emperors had once planned galactic conquest had been converted into a university. Students from dozens of species studied together, learning arts and sciences and philosophies from across the galaxy. The throne room where absolute power had once resided was now a library where anyone could access the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. Professor Velhan, the former commander, taught a course called The History of Empire and the Path to Peace. His students were mostly young Zephyrians who had never known the old ways of conquest. They studied the mistakes of the past not to repeat them, but to understand how civilizations could avoid the trap of believing that might made right. "Professor," one of his students asked during a recent lecture, "do you think the Empire could have found another way? A way to unite the galaxy without conquest?" Velahan considered the question carefully. "I believe we could have," he said finally. "But we were so convinced that we knew what was best for everyone else that we never bothered to ask what they wanted for themselves. True unity cannot be imposed from above. It must grow from mutual respect and understanding." The student nodded thoughtfully. "Is that what the Guardians are doing now? Imposing their will on the galaxy?" "An excellent question," Velahan smiled. "But I think there's a crucial difference. The Guardians prevent large-scale violence and oppression, but they don't tell individual worlds how to govern themselves. They maintain the conditions for freedom without dictating what people should do with that freedom." Indeed, across the galaxy, former imperial worlds were experimenting with dozens of different forms of government and society. Some chose democracy. Others preferred council systems, and a few developed entirely new approaches to collective decision-making. The Guardians watched, but did not interfere, as long as these governments respected the rights of their citizens and their neighbors. Lieutenant Zakhtar, now a civilian engineer, was working on one of the most ambitious projects of the new era. He and a team of scientists from 12 different species were collaborating to restore Green World, which had been devastated during the Imperial conquest decades earlier. The project was challenging, not just technically, but emotionally. Zakhtar found himself working alongside tree folk whose ancestors his people had killed. But instead of hatred, he encountered patient understanding and a willingness to work together for the future. "Why do you trust us?" he asked Oaksinger, one of the tree folk engineers. "After what we did to your world?" Oaksinger's bark covered. Face creased in what might have been a smile. "Because the past cannot be changed, but the future can be shaped. You are here now, working to heal what was damaged. That matters more than who caused the damage originally." The restoration work was slow but rewarding. Each new grove that they planted together represented not just environmental recovery, but a growing bond between former enemies. Zakhtar discovered that he felt more pride in planting a single tree than he had ever felt in conquering entire star systems. Back on Earth, Captain Shun received regular reports from Guardian stations throughout the galaxy. The network was vast, not just the awakened structures around Earth, but monitoring posts on thousands of worlds that had been sleeping for millennia. Each post was staffed by beings who had chosen to transform themselves into Guardians, dedicating their existence to maintaining galactic peace. "Captain," her aide reported, "we're detecting the formation of a new trade alliance between the Altair crystal cities and the Kepler engineering collectives. They're planning to share crystal growing technology in exchange for advanced manufacturing techniques." "Excellent," Captain Shun smiled. "Any signs of economic coercion or unfair trading practices?" "None. All agreements appear to be genuinely voluntary and mutually beneficial." This was the new galaxy the Guardians were fostering, one where cooperation replaced conquest, where diversity was celebrated rather than eliminated, where problems were solved through negotiation rather than warfare. But the transformation was not complete everywhere. Deep in the outer rim, beyond the reach of the Guardian network, rumors spoke of small groups of die-hard Imperials who still believed in the old ways. They gathered in secret, planning some kind of return to power. Captain Shun was aware of these groups, but she was not concerned. The Guardian network was constantly expanding as more worlds awakened their sleeping stations. Soon even the outer rim would be within their protective influence. And without access to weapons of mass destruction, the remaining Imperials could cause only limited damage. More importantly, the new generation was growing up in a galaxy where cooperation was normal and conquest was seen as a relic of the past. Young people from every species were learning to work together, to respect differences, and to solve problems through creativity rather than violence. Admiral Kethver finished tending his garden as the sun set over Zephyr Prime. Tomorrow he would attend a conference of former Imperial officers who were now working as advisors to newly independent worlds. They would discuss best practices for peaceful governance and share lessons learned from their mistakes during the Imperial era. It was strange how fulfilling this new life was. During his centuries as a conqueror, he had thought he was achieving greatness. But the satisfaction of helping others govern themselves wisely was deeper and more lasting than any victory he had ever won in battle. As he prepared for sleep, Kethver reflected on the message that Captain Shun had shared with him. During their conversation, the Guardians were not trying to control the galaxy. They were trying to give it the freedom